in this section, we will be working on our cross-cultural literacy. And what is that? It is your understanding of cultural differences across and within nations. And it also means that you understand how these differences impact the business environment. Now, my first point is that you are going to make mistakes. If you deal with foreign cultures or even cultures in our own country which are unfamiliar to you, you may make a mistake that damages a business relationship or damages your pride or hurts someone's feelings. Now, anyone who has traveled out of the country will tell you that it is a risk that you take, but I will also tell you that it is a wonderful risk. Even in your mistakes, you will learn about yourself, your own country, and something important about the other culture. I recommend that any opportunity that you have to get outside the borders of the United States, you should take it. Experiencing another culture for the first time is a thrilling and a memorable experience. So let's just start with a look at what culture actually is on the outside. It is not something that is easily defined. Typically, experts believe that it is some combination of knowledge, belief, morals, law, and customs, and other things that combine to identify a group of people as a member of a specific society. And you cannot approach the topic of culture without examining the research performed by Geert Hofstede, who is a leading expert on cross-cultural differences. Now, I'm going to concentrate in this video mostly on Hofstede, and will introduce you to a website which you should be using in your research and assignments on culture. Now, in this section, you will become familiar with the drivers of culture, such as values, norms, folkways, and mores, but also with the determinants of culture. Now, culture is dictated by our religion or lack thereof, political philosophies, economic philosophies, education, language, and social structure. And this social structure is how society is organized on a very basic level. One aspect that is considered part of our social structure is the emphasis that we place on the individual. Again, this kind of reminds us of what we discussed earlier about political systems being either collective or individual. And when a culture itself emphasizes the individual, then it seems reasonable that the political economy would also emphasize individualism. The part of the social structure, part of the social structure involves the social classes. Now, in the United States, we do not have formal social classes. Now, arguably, we have all sorts of different social classes, but the social classes that we have in the United States are not so rigid as to prevent our escape from them. For example, in the United States, if you were born to an impoverished family, it does not necessarily mean you will stay in that condition. However, it is very different in some other countries where the class you were born to is the class in which you have permanent membership. There is no escape. These classes are part of a caste system, and the existence of these social class systems indicates whether or not the country is stratified. Stratification means that the social classes exist within the framework of a hierarchy. And just because a country is stratified into social classes does not mean that it has a rigid social structure. Now, a stratified society can still offer social mobility, which is the movement of an individual from a class in which they were born into to a higher class. The caste system is the most rigid and does not allow for any mobility. In a class system, you do have mobility. Now, another consideration in whether or not the social structure has a rigid social strata is in the level of significance that is placed on it by the business. If social stratification impacts business operations, then it can be a source of business-related hostilities between management and employees, management and owners, and middle-class workers versus working-class employees. Another system that we will look at is the religious and ethical systems. While religious systems are shared beliefs among things held sacred, ethics refers to moral principles that shape the behavior of those in a society. Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, Confucianism, all have the potential to directly and significantly impact the business environment, depending upon which country is serving as your host country for business purposes. Now, when I speak of host country, I'm speaking of the country in which a foreign business sets up operations. If a U.S. company goes to Switzerland, then the United States is the origin country and Switzerland is the host country. Now, languages can also have an impact on business. Spoken language is something that many people study from an academic standpoint and then use it when they travel to that part of the world. In most countries, there's a formal language and an informal language, and oftentimes it is difficult to understand the informal language until you have spent some time in the country. The unspoken language can be a lot more challenging because it ties in closer with the aspects of custom, tradition, and behaviors. And when we start combining the impact of social strata, language, religion, nonverbal communication, ethics, folkways, values, mores, and even hidden signals within a country, it is easy to understand why culture would impact the workplace in so many different ways. So let's take a moment and look at this Geert Hofstede website. I'll try to click on the link here. We'll see what happens. Okay, and we'll go to it manually. All right, the Geert Hofstede Center. Hofstede's research focuses on issues relating to power distance, individualism versus collectivism, uncertainty avoidance, and masculinity and femininity. Now, when you are preparing your assignments and presenting your research on culture, this website may be assigned as a required resource. So let's begin with a general review of the website. The link will be provided in Blackboard and in your checklist. The website is Geert-Hofstede.com. And you will notice that on the home page that you will, and actually, this is not the home page I was expecting. We're looking at geert-hofstede.com/countries.html. And again, I'll provide this link to you on the checklist and in Blackboard. You will notice that on this page that you select the country on which you are performing research. And you will notice that on the home page, they give you some initial guidance on how the measures evolved. Now, that's easy enough to pull down the country. However, what I want to focus on in this video is the dimensions. So let's look at the power distance first. What is power distance? Now, I'm only going to read the first sentence, but you need to go to this website in your research and make sure that you grab the details. So on the Geert Hofstede scale, the power distance refers to the degree to which the less powerful members of a society accept and expect that power is distributed unequally. In individualism and collectivism, Hofstede examines preference for loosely knit social framework in which individuals are expected to take care of themselves and their immediate families only. Masculinity and femininity. Hofstede examines whether or not a culture prizes heroism, achievement, and assertiveness, or if it prizes cooperation and modesty and caring for the weak. Obviously, your more masculine ratings would indicate that a culture was more competitive. Uncertainty avoidance examines the extent to which members of the society are willing to deal with ambiguity and uncertainty. And some societies handle ambiguity and uncertainty better than others. Long-term and short-term orientation deal with the search for truth, balanced against the adapting of traditions to changing conditions, saving and investing, and perseverance. And indulgent versus restraint, Hofstede examines a society's search for gratification. Now, when all of these dimensions are combined, you can get a very good look at the culture of a country. There are some problems with it because some countries have more than one culture, so it's difficult to measure the impact of multiple cultural groups on a nation's overall societal culture. And also, the research team was primarily of European origin, so it is believed that the study may have been overly influenced by a Western perception. But it is important to recognize that cultures change based upon values and social turmoil, recent history, and generational influences. Even beyond that, increases in the quality of life and standard of living may also cause cultural change, as well as globalization. So in your study of culture, you should remember to be thorough but not judgmental, and recognize that your perception of a culture may not be how the culture perceives itself.